e4 and c5. We have a Sicilian defense, and we are going to see how good Garry Kasparov already was at the young age of 14. Knight to f6 is the Nimzowitsch variation of the Sicilian defense. e5 would be a possibility, after which we would have knight to d5 and d4 most likely. Pawn takes, queen takes, e6 is the main line. It's not such a bad opening, not such a bad line. It's definitely not the most popular one, but it's one thing that you can play against the Sicilian defense. Garry Kasparov chooses a more solid line, knight to c3, to defend the pawn that was attacked by the knights. We have e6, d4, pawn takes d4. Now in almost any Sicilian defense, black will always play on d4 given the occasion. Knight takes d4 back, and we have bishop to b4 threatening these knights. e5 attacking the other knight, and knight to d5 putting more pressure on these knights, because now if it was black to play again, you could capture the knights, pawn takes and bishop takes with a check and a fork on the king and the rook. So Garry Kasparov naturally defends his own knight, and we have knight takes and pawn takes, because if bishop takes and pawn takes, there would be queen to c7 threatening this pawn, and it's a fork. White cannot defend both pawns at the same time. So for that reason, Garry Kasparov recaptures with the pawn, because now this bishop is still defending this pawn, and this comes with tempo. So Garry West needs to move the bishop a second time somewhere, so there is no time to play queen c7, for example. In both lines, the pawns are isolated and doubled, but in this line, at least you get a tempo. And Garry West retreats his bishop all the way back to f8, because if he had gone to e7, for example, queen g4 would be a very annoying move. Castling does not defend this pawn, because we would have bishop to h6 threatening checkmate, and if you defend g6, the only move preventing the checkmate, you lose the exchange. So you don't want to play that, and otherwise you could play g6 to defend the pawn, but now you severely weakened these pawns, these dark squares, and this bishop is not on g7. With a flanketed bishop on g7, you are very much defending all the squares. Here the bishop is on e7 instead of g7, so these squares are particularly weak, and it's kind of a waste of time, not something that you really want to do. So instead Garry West retreats his bishop all the way back to f8, despite it looking a little weird if you're not used to see these kind of moves. And it's definitely not a good sign when in the opening you need to play that kind of moves. We have bishop to d3, developing the pieces, and you can see a development advantage from Kasparov compared to Garry West, at the cost of double isolated pawns on the c file. We have d6, putting some pressure on this pawn. Kasparov doesn't mind, he's not going to take, because queen to e2. He could also castle, but there is no danger for the king at this moment, so he prefers to bring the queen in, so that maybe if his opponent makes a mistake, he can checkmate it. Checkmate his opponent easier, more easily. And his opponent does make a mistake with knight to d7. This move puts some pressure on the e5 pawn, but it forgets a very important idea, is that this bishop on c8 was defending this pawn on e6. And Garry Kasparov sacrificed the knight because Guy West cannot take the knight on pawn takes. There is queen to g5 check. If you tried g6, bishop takes g6, pawn takes g6, and not queen takes, because you would have actually two pieces for the rook as black. But queen takes g6, which threatens the king. Comes with check, king to e6, bishop to g5 check. The knight can cover, and no, you don't take with the knight to then take the queen. You take with the queen, because then you can recapture with the queen, which is protected by the bishop, so you win a full queen. So that would have been one line possible. Now let me put the position back. After queen to g to h5, this pawn captured over there. There is still the knight on d7. So after, yes, this was the knight that sacrificed itself on e6. After pawn takes e6 and queen to h5, trying to move the king now does not work either, because for example bishop to g5 check, this would be winning the queen, or even checkmate if there was not this move, knight to f6, bishop takes f6, oh no, sorry, pawn takes f6, check. If you move the king away, you take this pawn, you're threatening to win the queen, and you're also threatening to promote, to win the bishop while promoting, so you will be forced to take this and to lose the queen. So that's not a good move. And if you recapture, you cannot sacrifice the bishop, because if the king recaptures, there is no queen h4 check, and wherever the queen goes, you lose the queen. So that would be winning. That's why Guy West did not recapture the knight. So let me go back, put all the pieces back on the board. There was this knight over there, the queen, white pawn on e5, and the black knight on d7. So Guy West did not recapture this knight because he would have lost the game immediately. But this knight is threatening the queen, and is threatening a fork on c7. So Guy West goes on b6 with his queen to defend against the fork. Except Garry Kasparov plays knight to c7 check anyway. He plays the fork. And in this position, Guy West resigned. And I'm going to show you why. Because you basically need to move the king and lose the rook and lose the game. Because if queen takes, you have pawn takes white is up one clean queen. There is 3 pieces left, 3 pieces left, 2 rooks, 2 rooks, 1 queen, and no queen for black. So that's how Kasparov won a brilliant game, a very short one, against a very strong player, Garry West, who is an international master, an Australian international master. And this game was played in 1977, when Kasparov was 14 years old. I was already a very strong player, but not a grandmaster yet. That came 3 years later in 1980. So that's it for this game. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't hesitate to leave a like and to subscribe to my channel. Lots of cool stuff coming soon. And on that note, I wish you a good night, a good evening, a good day, or whatever it may be, whenever you might be watching this. I hope everything goes well for you.